There are three main categories of water treatment for backpacking: chemicals, filters, and ultraviolet light. Chemicals are the lightest and cheapest, but they tend to leave a bad taste behind, so it seems that most folks these days have gravitated to the gravity-feed filters like the Sawyer Squeeze. Hey guys, I'm Dan from Shasta Bubba Adventures, and I've been using the ultraviolet light form of treatment with a SteriPEN for over 14 years now, and since I seem to be kind of an outlier in preferring this method, I thought you might be interested in hearing why I like this system and how it's worked out for me over such a long chunk of time. You might guess that ultraviolet light purifies water by killing the bugs. In fact, it doesn't actually kill them, it attacks their DNA and neutralizes their ability to reproduce. If they can't reproduce, they can't cause infection. Now, there are three main concerns in contaminated water: parasites, bacteria, and viruses. A filter like the Sawyer Squeeze eliminates parasites and bacteria, but UV light is the only thing that actually kills viruses, and so is effective on all three. Now, viruses didn't used to be much of a problem in the backcountry. The natural UV light from the sun would kill them before they could really do much damage. However, as more people are venturing out and, sad to say, not following proper toiletry ethics of doing their business far away from water sources, viruses unfortunately are increasingly becoming something that we have to pay attention to, especially if hiking in more frequently traveled areas or on the major long trails. By the way, I'd love to hear from you in the comment section below whether you are a fan of the Sawyer Squeeze filter, one of my fellow SteriPEN users, or maybe you're actually an old school ultralight chemical treater. We'll do a quick little poll here and see if I'm really as much of an outlier as I think I am. Now, there are several different types of SteriPENs. I started out with the Adventurer Opti, which weighs 4.5 ounces, and I used that for about 5 years, and I really enjoyed the lightness and simplicity of use compared to my old pump filter. However, when I switched from using Nalgene containers to Gatorade bottles, I learned that the Adventurer doesn't fit very well in the mouth of those. Now, UV light is dangerous to human beings as well as protozoa, so a safety feature is that the contact points need to be fully submerged or the light just shuts off. The Adventurer doesn't fit deeply enough for that to happen reliably, so I switched to the Classic 3 because it fits the Gatorade type bottles perfectly. The Adventurer has just one short contact point, but the Classic has one on either side of the lamp that are a little longer, and the shape of the Classic just reaches deeper into the bottle. By the way, UV light is blocked by both the water and the plastic container, so it can't hurt you while it's underwater. Shifting to the Classic meant that I can just set it in there and forget about it. Now, the instructions say to stir it around while it's in use, but I've gotten away with just shifting it around once or twice per treatment. The change of going to the Classic increased the weight slightly to 6 ounces, and incidentally, the weights I'm giving here include the batteries and the protective sleeve, but there were two other advantages to the Classic over the Adventurer. First, the Adventurer treats about 50 liters of water per set of batteries, while the Classic doubles that to 100. Second, the Adventurer uses CR123 batteries, which can be kind of hard to find, whereas the Classic uses plain old AA batteries. And I always use lithium batteries to maximize the treatments, so I usually am able to get through a whole hiking season on one set. I should mention that there are three other lesser issues of concern with water, and they are pesticides, heavy metals, and other chemicals that can contaminate water, like fertilizer runoff from farms. And unfortunately, neither a SteriPEN or a filter eliminates these. Thankfully, if you're a weekend warrior like me, we usually are taking water from pristine water sources in the wilderness or the high mountains that are pretty safe from these issues. So you really can mitigate these dangers, just by being mindful about the source you're taking water from. So avoid taking water downstream from a mine or where there's livestock grazing or a chemical plant. That would be bad. Related to that point, one con of the SteriPEN is that it doesn't work well if the water is cloudy with sediment, because the particulates that are floating in the water deflect the light and prevent it from reaching everything in the container. It could be argued that this situation is just as much of a challenge for a filter because filters get clogged up easily when treating cloudy water. With a filter, this is mitigated by taking along a syringe to backflow and clean out the pores, and you can also bring a pre-filter to get out the worst of the gunk first. I did try a Sawyer Squeeze Mini when they first came out, but I quickly soured on it because I really didn't like having to sit and literally squeeze the water through that filter. This probably sounds really wimpy, but I found it actually somewhat taxing to hold that tension for the time it took to push 2 liters of water through on a day of hiking many miles. But the biggest problem that I ran into was that this filter clogged up very quickly and no amount of back flushing helped to clean it out. Now, I've read that many people had similar issues with the Mini, so if you do decide to go with a filter, make sure that it's the regular sized Sawyer Squeeze or comparable filters from other companies. My hiking friends all use the regular sized Squeeze and haven't had problems with clogging on that model. The SteriPEN comes with a pre-filter too, but to be honest, I've never even used mine. That's partly because, as I've already said, most of the water sources here in the Northern Rockies, where I do most of my hiking, are crystal clear, so there usually isn't any cloudiness to worry about. And on the rare occasions that I did need to take from that type of a water source, I just use my ever-present bandana as a pre-filter. Side tip, before you leave home, make sure that the weave on your bandana isn't too tight to allow water to flow through freely. Made that mistake. You can do that by stretching the bandana over your water container and just make a little depression and pour slowly through that bandana. Pre-filtering is a slow process and you may need to shift around to different sections of the bandana as the fibers get clogged with the gunk that you're trying to filter out. By the way, if you're attracted to the Sawyer filter to save weight, consider that in order to be really safe, you will need to also bring along the backflow syringe in case of a clog, a pre-filter, and a dirty water container to hold the water before filtering, all of which kind of adds up to be about the same weight as the SteriPEN. The biggest criticism by far that you see of the SteriPEN is that it's electronic technology and that can fail in the wilderness. I can't really argue with that except to point out that, a filter is technology too and just as likely to fail by getting clogged. And also to reflect on my personal experience of using these 2 SteriPENs for over 14 years without ever breaking a lamp or having it fail on me. Except once. If you watch my trip videos, you'll know that it did fail me on one trip, and it was a doozy of a failure because it happened on day 1 of a 7-day trip crossing the Bob Marshall Wilderness. So no option to just bail out back to the trailhead. If you want to see what happens next, I'll put a link to that video up here. But the short version is that I always carry chemical treatment tabs in my emergency kit as a backup, like these aqua tabs. But I didn't have enough for such a long trip, so I got through with a combination of just taking water from sources likely to be uncontaminated and using the aqua tabs when in doubt. I did manage to get through the whole trip without any long-term problems, so in the end, it was all good. So what went wrong with the SteriPEN? Well, there are 2 possibilities. First, and probably most likely, I thought that I put brand new lithium batteries in the night before leaving home and might have mixed them up and somehow reloaded the old dead batteries instead. Since I thought they were new batteries, I also decided to skip carrying a spare set and save weight on the long trip, which was just dumb given the potential consequences. Now, a second possibility was that the first day of that hike, I was walking through very exposed country on a 100-degree day, and the SteriPEN was in the outside pocket of the pack facing the sun. When I stopped to filter water the first time, my thermometer, which was also on the outside of the pack, read 107 degrees. So it's possible that I did actually put new batteries in, but they got fried by the direct sun. According to my quick Google research, heat does actually cause energy drain in lithium batteries, but I don't know if it actually happens that quickly. But it seems likely that heat was a factor. So next time I'm hiking through a burn on a hot day, I'll know to move the SteriPEN inside the pack to protect it. On the other side of the temperature spectrum, I've read online some folks had problems with the SteriPEN not working in the cold, but that's never been a problem for me, even using it in the mid-20s. By comparison, a filter can actually freeze solid in that situation, so that's just another thing to consider. One thing that was especially agonizing about that time the SteriPEN failed was that I was also carrying a battery pack to recharge my camera and GPS, so if I was using the newest type of SteriPEN, the Ultra, I could have recharged it with that battery pack too. The Ultra doesn't treat as many liters as the Classic, but it is 1 ounce lighter, and the ability to recharge it has me thinking that might be my next purchase. My biggest complaint of the Classic is the lack of a battery indicator, which might have saved me on that trip, but the Ultra does have a battery status readout. Another consideration is that carrying a spare set of batteries does add a few more ounces, so the Ultra would also be lighter by not having to bring extras along. Speaking of money, the SteriPEN ranges from $64 for the Classic to around $100 for the other models, so it is a somewhat expensive piece of gear versus about $30 for the Sawyer Squeeze. On the other hand, mine have both lasted a very long time, probably longer than several gravity filters would have, and they work great. So for me personally, I think it's been well worth it. Incidentally, I just checked Amazon for those prices and they seem to be on sale right now. So I'll put a link in the description below to those sales for you, and I really hope that they are still be on sale by the time you're watching this video. Okay guys, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and thanks so much for liking and subscribing. I really appreciate the support that you give me by doing that. All right, take care, and I'll see you next time.